Nitrous oxide, we're gonna turn 570 horsepower into 780, but sometimes you gotta control the violence, and that's what you're gonna see this time on Engine Masters. My personal long-held belief is that nearly any V8 can and should accept a 200 horsepower shot of nitrous oxide. And on this episode, we're gonna talk through how to make that safe. I've actually done way worse, trust me. And we're also gonna tell you how to control that hit a little bit for extra traction at the drag strip and for extra safety on engine parts and drivetrain parts. It's all about what I call the hit. What happens when you stab the button? How violent is that nitrous gonna hit? We're gonna do that in a couple of interesting ways. First of all, just with something as simple as changing the length of some hoses, and with something a little bit more high-tech using an NOS mini two-stage progressive nitrous controller. So that's kind of the super low-tech and the high-tech, but super simple. Wait for it, it's gonna be cool. But man, right now I wanna tell you all about the horsepower that we're gonna be making, because this I love. We're gonna take 570 horsepower and turn it into 780 before we're done for the day. The engine we're starting with is my own GM LS-based V8. It started life as a 6-liter. It's now 408 cubic inches. It's meant to be a power outer engine, so it only has 9.3-to-1 compression. It has rings that are gapped for nitrous. It's all forged. It's got blueprint engine cylinder heads. The camshaft is a real tame average cruising LS type deal. The duration at 50 thousandths tappet lift is 225 on the intake, 238 on the exhaust. The intake manifold that we're gonna be using is carbureted this time. We're using the GM version of a single plane intake manifold, and the carburetor is gonna be a Holley XP at 750 CFM. Now for the nitrous system, it's sort of a Frankenstein of stuff. We've got an NOS bottle, a -4 feed line. We're gonna use NOS cheater solenoids. It's got a Wilson bracket that's actually pretty cool. And we've got a Zex perimeter nitrous plate under the carburetor. Just as a refresher course really quickly on how this is gonna work, nitrous oxide is stored as a liquid inside the bottle, and it travels through the hose up to that solenoid. On the other side, you got a solenoid that is controlling gasoline. The gasoline and nitrous are both introduced to the engine at the same time. The nitrous like freezes the intake charge, which makes power. It also carries oxygen with it. The molecule of the nitrous oxide breaks into oxygen under temperature and pressure in the cylinder, and extra oxygen means that you can burn more fuel, and that's burning the extra fuel and that coldness that makes a whole lot more power. Now, the thing is, when you open these solenoids, you've got nitrous and fuel going in at the same time. The nitrous is at about 950 PSI, and the fuel in a carbureted situation is about 5 to 7 PSI. The thing that can happen is the nitrous gets into the engine first. It spikes a little bit lean before the fuel gets into the cylinders, and what you see on a dyno chart is often a big spike in power. Like you'll hit the button, and boom, the power goes straight north, and that can be violent on engines, and that can break traction, and that's the thing I call the hit. That's what we're gonna try and control here. Now, I actually kind of dig it. I want to go wide open all the time, every time. Brule doesn't like it quite so much, and so what he heard from a lot of nitrous tuners is that you can affect that hit simply by changing the length of the hose that runs from the nitrous solenoid to the plate underneath the carburetor. Once again, that nitrous is at 950 PSI, so it's traveling that distance like stat. If you put a longer hose on it, does it slow that down so that the fuel has a greater opportunity to get in the manifold along with the nitrous oxide so you don't see that big hit? Well, we've heard that a lot, and we're gonna test it. We're gonna use an 8-inch hose, a 36er, and believe it or not, we also have a 5-foot-long nitrous discharge hose. Nobody actually does that, so if it doesn't make a difference, nothing will. Here's something that will guaranteed make a difference. That is the NOS mini two-stage progressive nitrous controller. What this thing does is allows you to go on a touch screen, and you can change that hit at the press of a stylus on your screen. For example, instead of just hitting a button and having 100% nitrous flow, you can start at 25% and ramp it up to 100% over any period of time you want. 1 second, 2, 3, 4, and we're gonna see how that affects the power curve on the dyno as well. All right, we're gonna go load this thing so that we can start making noise, and we're gonna start right away with a nitrous hit, a 200 shot with the 8-inch hose. I'm gonna sit down and talk to the Steves about all of this stuff, and by the end of the day, I think we're gonna have my LS running better than ever and ready to install on a car. We're gonna be running a lot of nitrous oxide through this thing today, so I think one of our first topics should be safety. What do you have for a tune-up?
Actually, I do have a pretty conservative tune-up in it. It's basically, it's considered a 175 shot, but it actually makes closer to 200 is my guess.
Okay.
From just past experience, it's basically a gasoline jet in the 60s and a nitrous jet in the early 70s. And I've actually got 13 degrees out of it currently.
He doesn't want to say, run 26 degrees of timing. Yeah. Because your LS might not say the same thing depending on what computer you're using or how you're measuring. So we talked about the jetting that you've got in the thing, about a 200 shot with about a 73 nitrous jet, 72.
Yeah.
And then we talked about ignition timing. We should talk about the fuel.
Sunoco.
Sunoco, what?
116.
Okay, so big, heavy, high-octane race gas.
Detonation is a death sentence. It's as simple as that. So we just cannot let it detonate, hence the high-octane fuel and the excessive, I'll say, by this much retard in the timing.
Just for safety.
Yes.
Yep, and making sure the thing doesn't run lean. And, of course, we've got a killer fuel system. It's all Automotive stuff, I believe, on the dyno, so that's never going to be a risk. And the engine itself has low compression. It's only 9.3 to 1. And really, compression ratio is something that isn't discussed a lot as far as nitrous hits, but I think the lower your compression, the more added nitrous oxide horsepower you can have and still be safe, just because the cylinder pressures are lower. And the last safety thing that this reminds me of also is the RPM at which we're engaging the nitrous oxide. Why wouldn't you hit the nitrous at 1500 RPM?
Because a 200 horse nitrous system is still 200 horse.
No matter what RPM you hit it at. And so therefore you do the math backwards on what the torque is.
At low RPM, cylinder pressure has to be way higher for a given horsepower gain, so.
There you go. I think we just start straight with the nitrous.
I say yes.
All right, first test, what are we doing? And what I really want to know is what you're gonna use for a hit RPM.
Well, you're not letting me push the button as normal. You want it to be a little more accurate than that. But we're actually using the NOS nitrous controller as a window switch at this point. It still has 100% activation as far as the solenoid is concerned.
Right.
But we're activating it at 4,800 RPM. I figure it'll take to about 5,500 to ramp fully in. And I'd like to carry the nitrous for about 1,000 RPM. So it will end at 6,500. And the shortest and first hose we're going to start with is an 8-inch long hose from the nitrous solenoid to the plate.
Which is like factory. It's like what a kit comes with.
Yes.
It's the shortest one. Okay. All right, 4,800 RPM, which even though the controller's at 100%, you think's not going to fully have all the air out of the lines and everything and not have the fuel hit the cylinder.
No, we've seen this before. It's not a vertical line. It still has to ramp in some. And as it accelerates the dyno, it's almost like a torque converter, you know, drives through it a little bit. And so I'm seeing about a 500 RPM move typically.
All right, well, we'll watch all of that.
Okay.
Cool, fire it up. Brule is ready. He's got his finger on the button. His button is triggering the window switch in the NOS controller. And pretty soon you're gonna see our LS run on its first shot with the original hose, 8 inches.
8 inch.
We got that. Now we're gonna see what happens with longer hose lengths. We've got a 36 and a 60. We're gonna go change them both up and come back and show you what happened. The only change we've made now is the length of the hose. We've got a fresh bottle, same amount of nitrous in it, exact same temperature. We're gonna see what happens. In comes the 60. Here's our hit with an 8-inch hose. I'll give you the peak numbers, but the peak numbers are not the story in this episode at all. When we had the 8-inch hose between the solenoid and the plate, we saw 729 pound-feet of torque and 766.4 horsepower. Now look what happens when we go with the 36-inch hose. And remember, the theory we were looking at here is that the longer the hose, the softer the hit on the nitrous. This tells you that that's not true. The black lines here are with the 8-inch hose, and the red lines are with the 36-inch hose. And you can see that when the nitrous is activated here, it tracks exactly the same. And then, in fact, the longer hose ends up hitting a little bit harder.
Yeah, and sooner.
Sooner. Yeah, you're right. Sooner and harder later on. And actually, there's a little bit of a horsepower difference at the top, too, which we'll explain. Now let's look at the 60-inch hose, 5 feet long. Same story,
Yeah,
basically.
Basically, it's a 36.
Okay, and look at this. This is the 60-inch hose in red. So the longest hose that theoretically should create the softest hit is actually giving an even harder hit. So does that mean that the inverse is true, that longer hoses hit harder? No. What it actually means is that it's really, really hard to get consistent with the nitrous systems on any of this stuff. So you guys are comfortable going, at minimum, in this test on this day, hose length is not a tuning tool. There's no consistent trend that says that it either hits better or hits worse.
No.
Does not matter, which makes sense to us because remember we were talking about once the solenoid opens.
It doesn't exist anymore as far as the track's concerned, from the bottle to the engine.
Right.
So when you're adding a few feet of hose here compared to 20 feet from the bottle to the solenoid, what percentage change? And then how fast does liquid nitrous go down that little tiny hose?
It doesn't care.
I think a whole lot of it has to do is if the nitrous bottle had 5 pounds in it, this might make a big difference. With 950 pounds in it, it's happening so fast, it doesn't see that distance.
Which brings us to the next part of the story, which is the real thing that we struggled with here, is that the variance in all these horsepower numbers right here and in how it hit really comes down to the volume of nitrous in the bottle, the size of the nitrous bottle, and the temperature of the nitrous bottle. And so our conclusion on this part of the test, again, is hose length is not a tuning tool, especially at this power level, and the bottle temperature and pressure is huge, and that's gonna translate to every power level.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, it's gonna get more radical.
Yep.
You're not gonna be happy unless I show you what this engine makes as a baseline without nitrous oxide. That's the red lines here. We're making 512.1 pound-feet of torque at 5,400 RPM, and it makes 569.4 horsepower at 6,500 RPM. And on this nitrous pull, the torque was 729.9 versus a horsepower of 766.4. So we are seeing a nitrous power gain of 197 horsepower.
Okay.
I call that 200.
Me too.
Yeah, because sometimes it gives you 210 and sometimes it gives you 190. It just depends on what mood the bottle is in at that particular moment. All right, let's go in the dyno cell and show you what's gonna happen next when we install the NOS Progressive Nitrous Controller. We got nitrous oxide on my 408 LS, and we've been testing, trying to tune the way it hits when you stab the nitrous button by using different length hoses. That was a dead end. We saw nothing earlier in the episode on that. I guarantee what we're about to do will work. We've installed this doohickey, which is an NOS mini 2-stage progressive nitrous controller. What this does is it's going to allow us not just to hit a nitrous button and have all the nitrous flowing at the same time, it's going to allow us to decide how much nitrous we want to start flowing right when we hit the button, and we get to pick a time frame at which it'll flow 100% nitrous. So we can go from 25% to 100% over 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever we want. Let me show you how we're gonna set this up on our little handheld device here. So I'm gonna start at 25% nitrous flow. If it's a 200 horsepower kit, this means I'm gonna start as a 50 horsepower kit, and it's gonna ramp up to 100% or 200 horsepower over 4 seconds. And now, because I'm now flowing much less nitrous at the hit, only 25% of it, I can start it at a lower RPM. Before, we were activating it at 4,800 RPM because we didn't want to hit 200 horsepower lower than that. But now, I am actually going to start flowing my nitrous at 3,500. It's starting at 3,510. It'll end at 8,000. We'll actually shut it off manually before that. Let me check my ramp builder. Yes, it saved my data. All right, that's starting at 25%. We'll see what that does, but I think I'm going to come in here and probably change it up a few times and see what happens. But here's our first setup. We saw what happens at 25% at the start. I'm gonna change to 5% and see if that softens it up at all. Now, Brule and I were talking about whether or not 50% duty cycle on the solenoid means 50% horsepower. So what I'm gonna do here is make it so that it starts at 50% and ends at 50%, and we'll see what kind of power we make. We're back from looking at everything with our little handheld controller. I ended up not just doing one program in it, we ended up doing several things. We're gonna start looking here at our power number that we ran last time. This is the one with the 60-inch hose. We have only got the horsepower plot shown on here. Normally we do horsepower and torque. It's gonna be easier to look at with just horsepower because we're gonna show you what happened when I set up the controller in its initial configuration to start flowing at 25% and then go all the way to 100% over 4.5 seconds. And there's the difference. In red, this is the controller in action, and in black, that is Steve Brule stabbing the button. Although we did have the window switch activating it up at 4,500 RPM there as well. So what we can see here is not 100% what I was hoping for. I thought that it would end up sloping a little bit more gradually, when in fact, setting it at 25% makes it hit pretty hard down here. The slope of this curve with the controller and this curve without the controller is a little shallower, but not as much as I thought.
You know, I think the advantage to the controller is if you don't like that curve, you can go put a smaller percentage in and you can soften it up and slow it down.
Yeah. You can. One of the things you can do actually is, I showed you the screen on camera that shows just go from 25% to 100%. Well, once you do that, the handheld will also make a graph with plot points on it. And let's say you're working at the dyno and you see this and you're like, ooh, this is a little meaty in here. I don't want that much torque gain at that low of an RPM. You can grab the points almost like a timing curve graph and pull it down and shape it to what you want. Now, the other elephant in the room here is that with the controller, we made 783.7 horsepower, which is super cool. That's a big gain over our baseline. But the reason for it is, once again, remember when we were talking about hoses, our big wild card was volume and temperature of the bottle. That was a brand new, fresh bottle, very first hit. Every time we hit a first hit, we would see 780 horsepower. But then, you know, we were fiddling with it quite a lot this time, and we ran it like 5, 6, 7 times in a row, messing with things, and it made about the same 740 to 750 over and over and over and over.
It seems that once the initial head is off the bottle, depending on the volume, it will maintain that pressure for a long period of time.
Let's show when I pulled it down to have 5% at the initial hit, ramping up to 100% over 4.5 seconds. Once again, we were just talking about how we made a bunch of runs and had lower bottle pressure. That's what you're seeing here. That's why the overall power is lower. But you can also see how it's affecting the shape of the hit, both with the lower bottle pressure and with the less aggressive attack on the NOS progressive controller. Another thing that I did, which was to start at 50% and end at 50%, meaning instead of jetting the nitrous system, I was like, I just want to run less power today because I don't want the track to throw me out for being too fast. And boom, right here in the red line is starting at 50% and ending at 50%. So you can see that it ended up with much less power than we've had on any of our runs. But because it was 50% to start, it hit harder.
Yeah.
So the blue line here is 25% to start, and the red line is 50% to start. And so you can see the difference in the attack right there. And that's actually with the blue having really high bottle pressure and the red being low. So that tells you that you can really make a difference with that controller.
What it shows me is you can kind of do whatever you need to do.
Yeah. Okay, it's time to sort of sum it all up. I think the big aha moment in the episode was everything that you've told me for years, that you've heard for years about nitrous hose length softening the blow on a plate system.
I was wrong.
It just didn't seem to be there, at least not on this test at this power level. It didn't seem to make a bit of difference.
No.
And then on the progressive controller, it ends up being more tunable than I thought, but probably needing more tuning than I thought. Just in the sense that I thought that this would be much more linear, and I realized, no, you probably have to go in there and mess with it just a little bit, but it's super cool.
It is, absolutely.
Yep, and it'll do it for 2 systems, and it'll also, you know, slice and dice your giblets and whatever you want. That's a bunch of other features.
The magic of electronics.
The second big takeaway, as you can see by how those power numbers vary so much at the top of the chart, is you really need to pay attention to your nitrous bottle volume and pressure if you want to be consistent with nitrous.
I think I need nitrous now.
I think you absolutely do, and I know exactly what I want to do with nitrous, which is coming up on my 582, probably the very next time that we all get together to shoot Engine Masters.
Electric eyes, they pull